there will be no real non-controlled currency in the world.
We're coming for you, banks.
Listening to different podcasts, like in a whole different reality, which they think completely different things about Bitcoin.
They have got my money in their banking system. I should be able to access it, right?
Appler is live.
There's a good number of fucking, like, pretty smart Bcashers.
Hello and welcome back to the Bitcoin Cash podcast, following Bitcoin Cash on its rise to global reserve currency. This is episode number 153, BCH, ZK Rollups, and crypto conferences featuring Jerry, aka Lightswarm. Today is Saturday, the 7th of June. No, it isn't. It's Saturday, the 21st of June, 2025. I've once again failed to get the date right on the slides. I'm your host, Jeremy. Jet is doing the producing, same as always. We will introduce our guest, but first we've got to talk about the price today. BCH has been mooning the last few weeks. We're now up to rank 12 at $470.99. So we're way up there, up nearly 20% probably from the previous episode. One BTC sat buys only 219.5 BCH sats, so we're killing it on the ratio against BTC, and one ETH buys only 514.8 mega sats, so we're also way up against ETH. Selene 30-day users at 382, although the stats module is bugged, so I think that might actually be inaccurate. And the Tokenaut TVL is at 10,505 BCH. So our first topic today is actually going to be a little bit about the price gains. We always used to do a price segment, and then I cut it for being mostly irrelevant a lot of the time. But today, it's really important that we talk about it. We've gone from rank 17 up to rank 12 as the altcoin market kind of bleeds out. BCH outperforming not only BTC, but the rest of the market too. Is this the BCH bank runs kicking in now that we've done 4 months of those? Is the rest of the world starting to notice that BCH is not a coin to be ignored, and it's kind of been delivering results this whole time, steadily shipping, completely undeterred by the price ratio? What do you think, Jerry? Why is BCH suddenly making another big run on the charts?
Oh, I think Binance is just running out of funds in their short selling reserves, right? They don't have the funds there, so it can only go up. No, but in more serious matters, I do think more people are starting to realize the capabilities of Bitcoin Cash. So yeah, it's just good to see overall.
And do you think, but how much do you think, like, I mean, you made a joke about it, but how much do you think the bank runs has played into it? Because I so badly want to believe, right? There's a part of me that just wants to believe that this was the one missing ingredient that BCH didn't have for all these years. Then we came up with the bank run idea. We started doing it. It immediately started sort of causing some small problems at the exchanges. We've now been doing it 4 months, like 8. I think we've had 8 bank runs basically. And that has really just seems to be escalating a little bit. Now the price is rising. Am I just telling myself a Cinderella story, or do you think that could actually be what's going on?
Yeah, I definitely believe it can be like what's happening in the back end. Obviously, we won't know how the exchanges are handling the users' funds, but yeah, it's I definitely foresee a lot of these short positions being closed out to facilitate a lot of these withdrawals.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing for the price to just sort of randomly go up, but obviously if we can sustain it and sustain it against the market, we will be able to continually sort of increase visibility. And of course, the whole idea is that it's a self-perpetuating cycle, right? So now that we have kind of pumped up to top 12, I've got a tweet here from Mario Norfal's roundtable where he says BCH hits 90-day high at almost $500. What's cooking with Bitcoin Cash? and it got like 75,000 K views on Twitter. So that's the kind of reach that even the most involved sort of BCH accounts rarely can get, right? So just simply the price going up is already kind of a marketing tool. And if that then gets more people to buy some BCH, it sort of just keeps propelling it higher. Do you think we're starting to break through all the slander and propaganda and disinformation and hating on BCH to where crypto is diversified enough that just if we're winning, people will jump on board?
Um, I think that, like ultimately people are still looking for, like that better version of Bitcoin. We're seeing a lot of interesting things and projects starting out on the Bitcoin Core side of things, but obviously there's a lot of contentions in the background. Um, but yeah, like I just feel that there's still not enough people that is really looking into it. So I definitely do think we have a lot more to go. Um, and yeah, if BCH prices go up to, let's say, something like 600 and the rest of the market stay relatively where they are right now, we could definitely take over Hyperliquid and become number 11 in that chart.
Yeah, well, that's going to be a critical element of what's going on here, right? Because BCH is currently ranked 12 at about 9.3 billion market cap, ahead of SWI at 9 billion, right? So we've just kind of barely flipped them. But then Hyperliquid is at 11.3 billion. They're down actually 17%. So we're about 2 billion away from flipping them. And that would put us at number 11, which would be massive, because then we're knocking on the door to top 10, right? And top 10 is kind of the quote unquote sort of legitimacy threshold. I feel like if you're top 10, nobody can kind of be saying, oh, you're just some stupid shitcoin that nobody cares about, which people have mostly given up saying about BCH anyway, right? But that would really just solidify it, that the haters would be running out of ammo.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll definitely need to get around the $1,000 range to try to get into the top 10 here.
That's right, exactly. So that we're like 2 billion from getting to Hyperliquid. So yeah, maybe about a 600 price. You're right. And then for top 10, number 10 currently is Cardano ADA at 20 billion, 20.3 billion. So we're 9.3 billion. So roughly doubling and then adding a little bit more puts us at about $1,000, and that would be enough to break into the top 10 if nothing else changed, right? Of course it will, and hopefully it seems like it might actually move in our favor, where if Hyperliquid and Cardano are declining, then that makes our job easier. If they're going down, then it doesn't take as much of a lift from us to get over the line, right? But I feel like, because I remember when I was talking to Paul Stortz, and I've got to look up this clip and have it ready to repost on Twitter. I said to him, like, at what point does it just snowball, right? Like, if we were number 2 in CoinMarketCap ahead of ETH, if we flipped ETH, we would flip BTC, no problem, right? Because everybody would just be like, this is the run back. There's no way these guys are not going to take, because it's not driven. We wouldn't even need more on-chain activity or anything, because it would just all be driven by narrative. And it's not like BTC is really used as a peer-to-peer cash system around the world. So it's not driven by that. So number 2 would definitely do it. Would number 5 do it? That puts us ahead of BNB at 89 billion. Like, Solana is number 6. If we flip Sol, does that get us enough hype to flip, ETH, that we then flip BTC? I don't know. At what point do you think the flippeting truly kicks in and we just see an insane FOMO as everyone realizes we're just missing out on this?
Yeah, and this might be a bit of a hot take, but I do think that once the meme coin market shifts away from Solana and into other chains, then yeah, people will start to take notice of things like cash tokens and even just like cash script and covenants into like making all these fancy stuff for people.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Jet, what do you feel? We've obviously been speculating on this show for years. Is this the flippening? When is it going to be the flippening? We had that big run to $1,600 like a few years ago. That was before CoinFlex blew up, right? And then tanked the price. But I remember at that time, I think you even said, I asked you, is this the flipping? And you said, no, it's kind of a bit early. It's not ready now. Given a few years of community growth, a few years of traction, narrative change, wallet build out, are we ready for it?
I don't think so. I hate to be a doomer here, but I think we still have like probably another 3 to 5 years away. But
Yeah.
my perspective has changed on that a little bit too, because I think part of my hesitation used to be about Tether, and I feel like it's pivoted away from Tether a little bit into what in the hell is BTC actually going to do? Like, I thought those guys were like set in stone. This is we're going to be the number go up store value coin, and that's going to be that. And yeah, now there's another variable in the mix. We have a bunch of disenfranchised Bitcoiners looking for a place to go.
But we would be the obvious
Yeah.
that's where everything can come together, right? I just feel like as BCH, imagine you are these guys, imagine you are sitting in BTC a little bit dissatisfied, and you've now kind of, because you probably weren't even that aware of it, right? That it's gone from number 20 to number 12, but maybe now, there's a bit of chat or it's starting to get on your radar, and then you look back a month or two later and it's like BCH hits the top 10. And then you look back a couple months later, it's like up to rank 8. At what point you just kind of think, oh, well, I've got to buy myself a little bit of this, quote unquote, just to hedge. But as soon as you've just hedged, now you've shifted your own internal incentives, because if you have one BCH and one BTC, which is only costing you less than 1% of your stack, now you're actually incentivized to buy, another double of BCH, make it 1% or 2% of your stack, and then if a flipping happens, you're twice as rich. So and that snowball can just take place very rapidly, right? There's no extra work that BCH needs to do. It's just how incentives are aligned as long as the snowball starts, right?
Yeah. What do you think? What do you like? I just think back to that BlackRock video that's like, nothing guarantees 21 million. And if there's a fork, maybe we'll get to say what the hell the real Bitcoin is. What do you...
Well, yeah.
No, go on.
Well, I agree with you that we're a bit early. That's basically my take on it. Is last time I wanted to believe, but there was a part of me that was like, yeah, look, the community is just not ready for it. Like, even if we did have that kind of price momentum, would the infrastructure, the wallets, the podcast, everything be built out enough, the conferences, that we could just start absorbing people in at that insane rate? And I think the answer is, like, honestly, no, right? Obviously, now, in hindsight, where we were at that time looks like peanuts compared to where we are now. But I think in 3 years' time, where we are now will also look like peanuts. And I don't know, part of me thinks, because when it happens, it will catch us off guard, right? Because we're just working away every day, making things a little bit better. That's an exponential. When it kicks in, it just suddenly seems like it's going bonkers, and it will happen so fast that even we will be caught by surprise. So that's my factor in favor of, like, well, maybe it already is starting. Maybe we've already done more damage than we think. But the more pragmatic part of me wants to say, I think you're right. I think we need another 3 years.
I suppose it depends on how we get there too, right? Like, I could see if some big institution comes in and wants to shake things up, them making the flippening happen. But I don't think that's, long-term goal. I'd much rather we get flippening happening because more regular ass people are using it. And I think that we'd have to notice. Right? Like, if I start getting a bunch of text messages from old people who have talked about cryptocurrency too for the past decade, then I know, okay, something's going on.
Yeah. But that would take a media headline of significant size. I mean, it's all interrelated, because as the price pumps, it creates those media headlines. And we've already seen that. There was an article by, what's the name? Who are those guys? CoinDesk. And they are like, propaganda shills by like DCG or whatever. But even they ran a story saying, oh, BCH nears $500, like sudden pump breakout. When you hit the top 10, you get a bunch of those kind of articles, right? And then maybe that adds enough hype to propel you up a little bit more, which then somebody writes an article, wow, I looked into BCH and actually it was doing a lot better than I expected. Jerry, what do you think? How do we get that media hype going, or is it still 3 years away?
I think we just need a big project from some of these other chains, like some DeFi projects like that. Maybe pumped off one, but something along that kind of level where, hey, let's give, Bitcoin Cash and Cash Token and all this ecosystem a try, right? Or it could be like one of those layer twos, like a lot of money has been dumped into these layer twos and they got to find a home somehow too, right?
That's right. When there's money there, they're going to spend it. I like that idea because we got to the point of we have the BCH pump .cash, right? And so we copied another ecosystem's projects, and our tech and our infrastructure is getting to the point that we can build a clone of their stuff. But like you say, that's the next level if they themselves start bringing it over. So it's actually like growing their ecosystem via the injection of external resources as well too. I mean, whether this is or isn't the time when it's going to start, we need to be as ready as we can for it, right? Do you have any thoughts on what we could do to be prepared as a community for whenever that sort of eternal September is, of just people just flooding in and all the channels are just overrun with BCH noobs who don't understand everything, screaming about number go up or something? Do you have any ideas what we can do to prepare in advance of that?
Yeah, like on that aspect, in terms of the overall adoption, I do think we need to do a bit more work on like supporting, like creating those kinds of educational materials, being able to actually like support a lot of these newcomers into the space. Obviously, like working with something like EVM is very, very different than on Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. But yeah, just overall, like where all the resources actually are. So that's something that definitely is a bit of a weak spot right now. Information is just basically everywhere, and it is a bit of hard to find out where to find everything at this point.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I mean, I've been seeing like Mini Satoshi. We have that Mini Satoshi site from Alex has been crushing it. Like people love reposting that everywhere. That's done a great job of getting people a more collective view of what's going on as well. I'm always sort of working on the podcast resources. John Moriarty did that excellent video about the chip process as well too. So I think those things are starting to appear. But yeah, I agree. We can do a much better job of having that information all sort of. I mean, it will be kind of to the winner go the spoils, right? In the sense that if everybody just jumps into BCH, even if the stuff is there, it's a bit hard to find. The smart people will be persistent and they will get to the bottom of it and they will find all the information, and then that will convince them to invest more. So if you're a low information, follower, then you're not going to benefit as much from joining the hype wave. But obviously we have to try and make that barrier to entry as low as possible. Jet, any ideas about that? What can we do to be ready for when the critical tidal wave hits?
I think we did a lot of that heavy lifting. Well, I don't know, man, because I'm not the most social person. Like the groups are going to be chaos, and we're just going to have to suffer through that. But I feel like Abla took care of the big problem, so I'm just going to sit back and kind of watch people come in and be like, hey, we got some cool shit going on over here, and gamble over here. Fingers crossed we get an event prediction by then. And it'll be a fantastic time.
But it won't necessarily be a huge surge in on-chain volume, right? That's kind of where I'm at. Like BTC is dead as a doornail in terms of on-chain volume, doing less than us on occasions. Okay, rarely, not every day or anything, but it has happened that the tippening where BCH is doing more transactions per unit time over a defined time is more than BTC, right? So, and they're at 100K, right? So that's what, a 200x for us. So we can easily, well, not easily, quote unquote, but you can see that we could 200x in price and hype and media exposure, etc., and have barely any on-chain volume going at all. Of course, that there would be some bump in it because people would start using the wallets, they would start trying it out, but that's transaction volume is only going to come probably later. Once everybody is involved, then they'll be like, oh, I can start building this stuff and it's actually useful, and then that will produce like a second wave, I guess. I don't know. Okay, but we're in consensus here. Sounds like then that this is not the flippening. Give it 3 years. See you in 2028, maybe.
Yeah, give me more time to stack up on my BCH positions.
So people were saying that, and I was kind of like, what have you guys been doing the last 4.5 years? Like, it's not like there's been any shortage of time to buy in some BCH at nice low prices. So yeah, anyway, I think everyone should be prepared because yeah, when it happens, it will catch us off guard. And in the meantime, we just keep cracking on day by day. But it is good to see that all this slander and propaganda and stuff is basically just instantly vanishes. Well, it already has been because we've been slowly debunking it all. And then on top of that, you just get some price pumps and suddenly you're the new darling that everyone wants to talk about. So in that sense, number go up solves a lot of your problems. Okay, all right. So our guest today, now to officially introduce him, Jerry, aka Lightswarm, is a freshly minted chip proposer, Optin wallet dev, and also an OpNext and many other conferences attendee. We'll talk about that too. Welcome to the show, Jerry. How do you get into Bitcoin?
Thanks, guys, Jeremy and Jet. And yeah, no, it's Bitcoin has been an over 10-year experience and journey for me. I actually got in right after I graduated from university. And that was purely due to my degree being completely worthless in the real world. So it's yeah, I'm not gonna lie, right? Like a bachelor's of biology, it's kind of useless in today's world. But yeah, it was around that same year where I saw the initial Mt. Gox pump going to like $200-300, and so just out on a whim decided to purchase some and yeah, I saw the prices go up, and it's like, hey, this might be a way to pay off my student debt. Obviously, like it promptly lost that money into Mt. Gox, which wasn't that much to begin with. It was, I think, it was $40 or so. But yeah, afterwards, again, not much to do, very, very low job prospects. I found that, like in downtown Toronto, they were organizing a lot of these early Bitcoin meetups. So yeah, that's basically how I decided to, just jump into the deep end of the pool and just try to figure out what's going on in the space. So I guess, like I had the fortunate luck to actually meet a lot of the quote unquote OGs in the space. Most of the Ethereum co-founders, they essentially just came out from these local meetups when Vitalik came out. And yeah, afterwards, I kind of just wanted to continue that kind of atmosphere, that kind of vibe. So yeah, I just started my own meetup group with a few friends called Bitcoin Bay. And yeah, just really haven't looked back since, right?
And how's that going today? Is he still running meetups?
Yeah, still running meetups. I'm actually going to be starting with a new group pretty soon. But meetups. We've done hackathons in the past. Various sorts of workshops. The main thing here is that in Toronto is that there's a lot of people that have really interesting projects that they're working on. And what we like to do is basically create these kind of like showcases or like demos, shows and tells. Just get people to like showcase what they're actually working on and just generate some attention and hype for them. Next, so July 12th, actually, sorry, 14th, that'll be on a Monday. I'm actually going to be doing a session on an introduction to Bitcoin Covenants. So not exactly Bitcoin Cash exclusive, but there's enough overlap to showcase and get the newcomers, or at least the less technical people, up to speed on what's going on.
Yeah. So what kind of mix of people have you seen like now and over the years? Like, do you see a lot of BTC people? Is it more BCH people? Do people float in from other different coins? Does that let you keep a vibe on the industry? How does that play out?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because like Toronto being kind of like the birthplace of Ethereum, it's hard to be a maxi in any of this stuff. So generally speaking, the people have been like really just people from like the main street, right? You have people who are students, fresh graduates who are looking for work, to people who are in these like established institutions and other corporations and whatnot, middle management folks where they want to make the jump. Nowadays, like you're actually seeing a lot more people from like the legal, the corporates, the banking sectors, so on and so forth, coming in. And yeah, it's just a good mix, right? There's not really that much of a quote unquote maxi. Well, I mean, there are pockets of maxi groups, right? But the overall, it's a very healthy mix of just general public who are very vested and interested in the space overall.
That's awesome. That's awesome. It's so cool to hear. And then you've been working on your wallet opt-in as well too. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so the opt-in wallets, and I might end up doing a rebranding on that, but who knows? The basic general gist of it is back in 2019, I believe, Roscoe had just released his cash script, the cash script SDK and compiler. And funny enough, I believe I was one of the people in the sample groups from his research paper, from his master's thesis. So yeah, I got good chance to try things out very early on. And what I wanted to do back then, back in 2019 or so, was try to integrate this cash script component into a wallet. So I think back then it was working with the Badger mobile wallet. I forgot I think his name was Spicy Pete, the guy who was originally maintaining it. But yeah, like after COVID lockdowns and whatnot, had to really just shelf that quite a lot. We actually did get a working prototype, not necessarily a working prototype, but a working integration with the wallet itself back then. But yeah, I just had to put things on pause. And years afterwards, like found out that the library is no longer compatible with React Native due to libauth using WASM and stuff like that. So yeah, it just ended up being like a complete rework of the entire wallet infrastructure. So thankfully, nowadays you have ChatGPT and other AI models to help you do a lot of those coding. So yeah, this basically, just my attempt to integrate all of these covenants and like more advanced scripting capabilities into wallets. The idea is really just to empower the end users. A lot of the wallets I've seen in the past, they're really focusing on just the onboarding portion. But the main thing that I've always seen is that once people are actually onboarded, it's very limiting on what they can actually do. You can do basic buying and selling, you can do trading here and there, but beyond that, it's very, very limited, right? You more or less need to rely on something like Wallet Connect, which could work, but then also exposes a lot of attack vectors for the users as well.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And so, do you think we're doing a good job of slowly starting to, because the power in the BCH VM, especially these days, is absolutely enormous. But you can see even across the entire crypto ecosystem, industry, whatever, even in where those things are possible, and people have so many cool ideas of let me build this or let me build that, but the barrier to entry is just so high. Even now, like you say, with AI tools, you've still got to be very in the weeds to figure any of this out. How do you think we can do a better job of lowering that barrier to entry?
Yeah, I think overall it's kind of like what the Ethereum people were focusing on early on in the day, where like not many people are familiar with Solidity, like they're still trying to figure things out. I think overall we just need to do a better job of like one, getting the documentations and all those links, and also just getting people to write their own guides and articles to like share what they know, share how to build these kinds of tools and applications. But also, things like like these kinds of hackathons where there is some sort of incentive for people to actually focus their time on it. Because I'll be honest, for a lot of these people these days, it's like if they're not getting paid, it's kind of like a waste of time for them, right? The economy is kind of gone to crap, so they're all just looking for money one way or another.
Yeah, well, that's something that I think we can definitely look into more as a community too. I know there was that one, was it called Coin Riot or Coin Hack back in the day that they were even trying to get me involved to do something with their sort of conference or hackathon or whatever. That was around Smart BCH, and then subsequently Smart BCH kind of fell apart, and I think they also did a bit too. So between those two things, it never happened. But I've felt for a while that there would be a huge opportunity in terms of having a BCH hackathon, because you could theme it around the lock-in of the new chips, right? So you could have it in November 15th or just afterwards, something like that, where you could have then people building and experimenting on ChipNet, taking advantage of all the new features and all the new ideas. And there's already going to be kind of momentum and hype around that. And then that also provides a little perfect contrast with Bliss at May at the actual upgrade. So I think there's huge potential for a BCH hackathon type of conference or event, or even you could do an online thing. I've talked with Luke Pryor about doing something like that, where you could get people involved from all around the world and helping people to link up maybe with people like you who are a bit more experienced and already kind of know a bit of what's going on, to get them down the rabbit hole a lot faster. But just, of course, as always, it's a someone problem who has the time and energy and resources to actually attack this. But I'm sure that would be hugely successful if sort of the right person with the right enthusiasm came along to do it. What do you make of that kind of idea?
Well, I'm just on the website right now. I think it's called Coin Party. Back in 2021, and it's
Yes.
funny because it says it's by Bitcoin Unlimited. So I guess that's what happened to that.
Oh no, that's a different thing. There was one called
Oh, that's a
Coin
different thing.
Riot as well, Coin Party. But
Oh, okay.
I mean, it's the same thing. Like it's
Yeah,
such a clearly, obviously good idea, but it's just hard to keep sustaining it over time. Like you say, money has to be a big part of it, right? I mean, you can
yeah.
have people who are passionate and enthusiastic, but people who are coming to participate, they either need to see a prize that they can win so they can make money that way, or they need to see that maybe there's a lot of sponsors, so they feel like, oh, okay, in that way I can get a lead in with the sponsors. Or if they see that the industry itself, like if BCH is really starting to kick off and get a lot of hype, then they'll think, okay, well, there'll be jobs and I can be the first one onto this tooling, right? So you need kind of one of those financial incentives driving it a lot, I think.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like I think that's the main thing, that's the key ingredient that's missing, is the overall financial incentive. Because like a lot of these other hackathons, all people need to do is just throw an absurd amount of money into the prize pool, and automatically you just have like students come in, and a lot of time they're just rehashing the same submissions that they've done, except just change the chains into whatever that's compatible.
Yes, but regardless, it gets them familiar with your ecosystem. It drives tooling improvements. It drives all that sort of stuff. So I guess it is kind of a sense that money once again can solve a lot of our problems. I don't know, but anyway, this is just to put this idea out there. I feel like anybody who has a serious interest or thought around a BCH flavored hackathon, you could definitely get something going there. I'm sure if you looked around, people would be willing to throw in some money. I would be willing to maybe throw in some money and sponsor it, and so forth. I'm sure you could find other people, and yeah, especially something remote. I feel like, because we're doing all right with Bliss as having a physical conference, it would be really cool for some sort of online event which has its own pros and cons, because then everybody can get involved in it, and it's also suitable for a hackathon because you could run that over sort of a rolling window of 48 hours or something, so people in every different time zone can also be directly involved too, which I think would be really cool. But I don't know, are there any other kind of, I guess there must be in the crypto scene, any really successful online hackathon type things? I'm not too familiar with that.
Yeah, I know Citrea right now, one of the Bitcoin Layer 2 solutions, Rollups, they're doing a hackathon right now. And I think it's a rolling hackathon where they have different phases of qualification. But yeah, I know that ICP is also planning for a few. So yeah, there's definitely like a lot of like these online hackathons popping up here and there. In-person hackathons tend to be a lot more narrow focused in terms of
Mm.
the scope on what people do. So I think it was at the Consensus Conference last month in Toronto where they had a hackathon, a 3-day hackathon, and yeah, it was just like whatever sponsors that wanted to come in and put the prize money down. There were like Aptos, there were a few other of these chains. Um, but yeah, like the in-person hackathons, it's a lot more different than the online ones. Obviously, the time span is shorter, but you do kind of get like that kind of crunch moments, especially if people know what they're doing. Versus the online stuff, it's a lot easier to just lose people along the way.
Yeah, well, especially if you're running, like you say, those ones that are a long tail thing that's running over weeks or months, like it's hard to sustain that interest. I don't know because I've never done such a thing, so maybe there's a reason that they do it that way. But I would think it would be best to maybe you don't want it to be like 24 hours or something because that would maybe be a bit too short, especially if you have people from different time zones checking in. But something like 72 hours or maybe like 96 hours. I think 72 hours is probably my intuitive like sweet spot there for some
Yeah, I
kind
think
of
like one
online
week
hackathon.
would be like the cap.
Yeah.
Just for something like hackathon, just get a basic prototype out there, and what happens afterwards. You can just build your projects further along that way.
Yeah, exactly. Because if it's under 48 hours, it's kind of the point where people are just kind of like, okay, we're just going to skip sleep, knock down some Red Bulls, just go all out. And by the end, we'll basically just collapse in a huge wreck. Once you're starting to get to a week, it's sort of really like, okay, you would want to be planning, okay, we're going to sleep at these times and something like that. Also, it's hard for people to actually maintain focus on something like that for a week, even if it is remote, so they can do it remotely. They're still going to have their job, or they're going to have other things scheduled, or their cricket team, or whatever. Like, there's going to be other stuff going on. So I think, maybe over a weekend, like planned well in advance, you could maybe make that happen, like Friday to Monday or Friday to Sunday night, or something like that. But I think it's definitely a huge opportunity, and I really hope somebody jumps on some kind of idea like that. All right, let's crack on then. So, the theme of the show this week is ZK technology, and you have been driving the ship a little bit here, actually, Jerry. It was a few weeks ago. It wasn't like super recent, but it wasn't super long ago. You announced your chip 2025-05 native elliptic curve arithmetic operations, proposing to add op ECAD and op EC mull, as well as some other ones potentially to BCH. But before getting into that, can you just give me a little bit of background about zero knowledge technology and why it's so trendy for everyone to be excited about in BTC and ETH land at the moment?
Yeah, so zero knowledge proofs, as the name suggests, it's basically the ability to prove some sort of information without revealing any aspect of that source, right? So like for the privacy minded, this is obviously very very intuitive and where it could be useful and applied. Places like chains like Zcash and Monero, they use some versions of it. Ethereum, they're mostly using it to help with scaling, I guess. But there is still like when you have things like real life data, like let's say health records or anything that's sensitive that way, you definitely don't want to be storing that on chain whatsoever. You want to have that kind of fingerprints association with the actual data and the way you're proving it on chain. So yeah, quite honestly, this was mostly inspired by me just listening to your podcast with with Jason Tresner. Is like oh yeah, we're gonna have loops, we're gonna have big ends, we're gonna have all this kind of like VM limits. But then the caveat is all this is great, but it might still not be suitable for these kinds of heavy cryptographic calculations and whatnot. So yeah, that's basically when I decided to just take a look at it, see what's actually going on, what kind of viabilities are there, and yeah, just hopefully this serves as like an initial crack. I definitely don't want this to be like the reference documentation for things because I'll be very frank. I kind of failed first year math in university, so I don't want people to trust my math on things, right? It's more so like my analysis and my feedback on like my viewpoints on some of these things. But yeah, I'm sure there are better solutions to the things I'm proposing out here. But yeah, hopefully this serves as a good starting point for people.
Yeah, no, it is. Well, firstly, it's amazing to hear you getting inspired by the show, but secondly, also you're exactly right. Like the first iteration is basically never going to be the perfect iteration, and even just having someone like yourself jump in and be excited about it and get the ball rolling then creates discussion, it creates interest, and it gives more reason for everyone else to be involved. So I mean, at some stage, I would like to get on, maybe on the show, we can have somebody who is kind of a big explainer of this kind of technology, because I've tried watching several sort of YouTube videos and stuff to sort of get exactly to the bottom of it. The best analogy that I've heard so far about it, because it's a bit of an unintuitive concept, right? Proving something without leaking any data about it, is like if I had a Where's Wally photo, one of those pictures where you have to find the Wally on the canvas, and let's imagine I put that, and then in front of that I put a huge black canvas in front of that, which goes way outside the edges of the actual Where's Wally canvas, right? And then I say to you, I know where Wally is, and you say, prove it. And so I go behind the canvas and I adjust the Where's Wally picture so that you can just see Wally through a small little hole in the black canvas, but you can't see anything else. So you don't know, what else you should be looking for. You literally can just see that I have found Wally and I know where it is. And then I put my hand over the hole and I move back the painting to another random position, right? And then I can take away the black screen and you can see, well, here's the Where's Wally painting, and I know where Wally is, but I haven't given you any extra information about where it is. So that's kind of how I think about this idea, but it's not necessarily the most intuitive. And I guess, like you say, it's very ideal for things relating to people's data and privacy, and especially since we're in cryptocurrency, which the chains or the ledgers are by default transparent, right? You have to publish the information to the chain. So the crypto part of cryptocurrency, the cryptography part, is a good way that maybe we can create some more separation between information being public and verifiable, but not being sort of completely public, right?
Yeah.
Do you see?
And
Go on.
a good way that I've seen it be described is it's basically taking the ideas of the public and private key cryptography using the elliptic curves and whatnot, and just instead of the public and private keys, we're just using it for the actual data itself. Sorry. So yeah, like it's very very similar to how the current stuff is being done right now. What I would say is that some of these implementation definitely, and full disclosure, like most of this research was just fed through AIs and just rigorously asking it, is this actually true? Are you making things up? Like, where are the actual references to things? But yeah, it's how should I describe this? There's still a lot of optimization that could be done even with the current implementations. So like whatever I'm like proposing here and whatnot, again, it's not just like a good starting point, but also it might not even be necessary if we find better solutions to things.
Yeah. Now, I think part of the reason that it's important that you're bringing this into the discussion as well too is because this whole area of research, I feel like, was really started on Ethereum, because they were the ones who were sort of more in the kind of like non-ossifier camp. Let's just add a lot of power to the scripts and so forth. And so there was a lot of momentum and people exploring different cryptographic ideas. And then on top of that, they ran into the scaling bottleneck. And unlike BTC, where they just cope and say Lightning's going to fix this, they were like, okay, we actually need some real solutions. So they kind of hit onto this zero knowledge technology as one method to do that. Now that has started to bleed back into BTC with things like BitVM and Citra and whatever else. They're trying to sort of copy that same Ethereum research or ideas, but remixing it in their own way. So I think it's really important that we also are getting ahead of the game or kind of are following up in that regard too, right? Because BCH is going to provide that perfect counterbalance where on one hand, we don't have the sort of scaling limitations because we're a UTXO chain, but at the same time, we do also have the very powerful upgraded VM. So it seems like if we can get those two messages out there, which sometimes takes building a first initial version to motivate somebody to come in and do a better version, we could actually attract a lot of the dev talent and maybe the investment money and so forth that is working on these type of projects in other chains. Do you see that happening?
Yeah, for sure. And one good example of this is actually ZK Starks, so STARK. So the first generation of these zero knowledge rollups, I believe, is called ZK Snarks with an N. But that requires a slightly different curve than what the Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash elliptic curve uses. So I'll be honest, I don't want to touch the consensus level on like that much. So whatever is actually like natively compatible with stuff, that's kind of what we're looking for. But for ZK Starks, and it's fortunate because I do have a contact who's at Starknet, and the whole opcodes in the Bitcoin Core space, like opcat, are they going to add it or not? I do think all of the tools and the functionalities for enabling and supporting ZK Starks are actually available on Bitcoin Cash today. So there's no upgrade needs, no upgrades, no changes, no nothing like that. They can just directly implement it. There's also something called bulletproofs, which is more used for things like confidential transactions. That might require a bit of tinkering with with how the balances work out, but right now I'm just looking at just strictly on the scripting side of things. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of like good potential for these other projects to come in and either just directly migrate or propose like some light changes to better facilitate like whatever they're working on.
Yeah, so tell me about this chip specifically then. So you've been working with this idea of adding op EC add or op EC mul. They're just, I guess, just the basic primitives that you kind of know that everybody would need. How much further along do we go than that? Is it? I understand that this is just a sort of rough draft and first pitch, but walk me through the chip proposal so far a little bit.
Yeah, so this proposal basically just looks at the elliptic curve math operations, so the basic ones, adding, multiplying, and then there were some suggestions of adding a few more just in case they might be needed. So things like inverting the modulus and doing some multiplication with point generators and stuff like that. But yeah, essentially it's what so my approach for this was really just asking, like what are the basic operations that would make these kinds of zero knowledge proofs more viable, and see, like if we didn't have these in there, if we didn't have these opcodes in there, what would be the cost to basically emulate them with the operations that we do have, right? So yeah, like these basically just popped out. There are a few where it's a lot more controversial. It's a lot more like consensus breaking, I guess. So right now at this point, I just want to avoid those kinds of really, really controversial stuff. Just working on whatever is actually like more compatible with what we got so far. So the EC add, the EC multiply, things like that. I have to go through the notes over like what the AI was spitting out. But yeah, essentially it was saying it was like magnitude folds improvement in terms of efficiency compared to just emulating all those operations with the current arithmetic functions.
Yes, but I mean, I guess the kind of the idea is maybe somebody could make. I don't know who would have the time necessarily to do this, but somebody could make a kind of emulator, like you say, using the existing stuff, and it would be maybe inefficient, but it would at least prove the demand for it, right? And then we could simplify it down later. I mean, I think we'll see how it shakes out over time, right? But I wouldn't be surprised to see this going the same direction that we have with everything else, which is where it kind of iteratively happens year over year, right? It's nice to have a long-term sense of, in the end, we want to have all these different options, but it wouldn't surprise me if there was some kind of proposal saying, let's just add one or two little pieces and we'll see how far we can get with that. And then people might either be more surprised or less surprised as to how far we can get. And then that sort of drives the roadmap for what would be the next things to build, right?
Yeah, and when I was looking through BitVM, it seems that a lot of what they're doing is so the components of these kind of ZK proofs is that you ideally do want to be able to verify the proofs on the chain that you're working on. If you have to rely on some other infrastructure to verify it, then all you're doing really is just being the store of the data. You can't really do too much with it afterwards, right? So BitVM, I believe for Bitcoin Core, they're really just supplementing a lot of the opcodes that it's not activated. So things like opcat, things like op multiply, which again they are they are activated on Bitcoin Cash. So I don't see why they can't really just move over and use Bitcoin Cash as one of the chains. But yeah, there are still some other like areas where potentially we could get these kinds of efficiency gains just by having simple opcodes to do that, like iterative amounts of calculations, and like thousands of opcodes just compiled down to just one or two.
Yeah. I mean, one thing, and we've got on the next slide, is this idea of a lot of the interest from the BTC and ETH sides both has been in this idea of rollups for scaling. Now, I'm not an expert on this, so take this all with a grain of salt. But as far as I understand it, basically the idea that they have is you have essentially a layer 2, you have a second blockchain that you run, and then you hash together all the contents or all the transactions or whatever somehow, and then you submit that onto the layer 1. So the layer 1 is just storing a proof or a hash. I'm not sure whether it would be both or one or the other, but you put that onto the main chain, and then you can sort of refer back to that on and say, look, the second chain that we have here, the little sidecar chain, is all valid because we have the proofs which are all being done according to the regular security and node network and everything, etc., of the layer 1, right? So in that way, you could get a lot of quote unquote scalability, where instead of needing to be able to fit 10,000 transactions on the main chain, you could maybe just fit in one and then get access to all that extra space, right? Now, the problem here, there's a couple of problems. Firstly, it's sort of more complex than everybody just being able to just transact on the main chain. But secondly, is if you then have people who are transacting in this rollup, if they want to send a transaction to somebody on the main chain or vice versa, then now you've got a compatibility issue. Like, how does money get into the rollup or out of the rollup or whatever? And it gets even worse if then you have multiple rollups that are all anchored onto the same thing. How do people send in between each rollup? And if you have a bridge, well, now you have to build that bridge, but now you have to have the security of the bridge, and you have to have all of the bridges between. So it's exponentially worse every time you add a new rollup, right? Which is why a lot of the ETH and BTC chains are having problems. But on BCH, that wouldn't, the strategy is layer one scaling, where you just skip all of that because everything is on layer one. Do you think that that will be maybe a barrier to getting interest in the BCH community in these ideas? Or is this perhaps why those BTC or ETH guys don't kind of want to try building this stuff on BCH, even if it's technically capable?
Yeah, I'll be honest, I think it's just a lack of awareness. It's they're focusing most of their time and energy on their own tech stack, and how much time do they really have to look at, like what Bitcoin Cash is doing, right? But yeah, just going back to your earlier points, like there's definitely the roll up portion, and then there is, that kind of bridge, right? So it is maintaining different, like infrastructure stacks and whatnot. The other thing that you mentioned was that, if you do have multiple of these rollups, I think because these rollups, especially when they're using something like BitVM, it's not cheap, right? I think you remembered one of the guys from Citrea, his talk at OpNext. He was basically saying that if you actually do have, like let's say 10 of these rollups, you're basically going to be filling up the entire block. And these blocks, these verifications, I think it takes about like a week or two to fully satisfy everyone. Like you can still dispute sometime around there. So yeah, it's I need to like look into the talks and listen back to it again. But yeah, if you do have, let's just say 5 to 10 different rollups all trying to anchor themselves on Bitcoin, that's just not going to work. Like you don't have that much storage capacity in there. So and yeah, for the cash token parts, really, it's my kind of thinking with this paper was, like how do we actually try to enforce these kinds of proofs, whether they are for rollups or whether they're just for regular zero knowledge proofs, where it doesn't have to be another chain, right? It could just be like raw data that you want to have someone be able to verify. Um, so like with the cash token stuff aspects and the commitment fields within the NFTs for the cash tokens, it basically provides a really easy, convenient way to actually do that kind of commitment tracking. And plus, with the native introspection capabilities with cash script, it then becomes a lot easier to just enforce what you're expected to like produce and whatnot. Uh, so yeah, that's kind of like the basic gist of it. Now, any sort of like actual on-chain proof is not there because I haven't looked into how to actually do that right now. But also, like any of the incentive mechanisms, like I think in the paper I was laying out a scenario with just a 2 of 3 multi-sig setup where some of these other chains they'll have like way more like actual N of M multi-sig, but just for a very simple scenario, I just decided like 2 of 3 multi-sig. All they can do is just make that commitment, and whoever makes the commitment gets paid out a certain amount, right? So uh, all those kinds of setups could be like adjusted, modified to suit whatever people's needs. But yeah, it's just showing how much it will actually cost in terms of like storing that kind of just basic commitment. I think if you were actually to include the proofs themselves, it probably would be a lot bigger and more costly and expensive. But again, like I just don't have access to like how do I even figure out those numbers at this point.
Yeah, but the idea is that we generally, so this is to say you've published this paper as well too that I have here on the slide, a framework for zero knowledge rollups on Bitcoin Cash using cash tokens and cash script that you put out even just within the last week. So it's basically just getting to the bottom of the fact that the BCH community have actually been making the right upgrades, right? In the sense of cash tokens upgrade and native introspection upgrade, even if they weren't intended to unlock this specific kind of functionality, a good generic upgrade like a hammer is good in a lot of situations, right? You don't need to know what type of house you're going to build to know that you're going to need a hammer, or that it would be quite helpful. So I guess it's quite encouraging to see that the dev choices that we've made so far are paying off. And like you said, maybe it's just an awareness issue. So do you think as people look into this stuff, they'll kind of really start to realize the power of what we've built, and then maybe bring their ZK technology interest here?
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, right? Like Starknet and Starkware, they could probably directly port over whatever they're working on today, right? So no further changes is really needed. And even for a lot of these, like DeFi projects where like they said they've been working on these kinds of layer twos just for the scalability aspects. Well, why not just use cash tokens? Why not just use the basic layer ones? You don't need the layer twos for everything, right? It's quite honestly, I think when I was mentioning to you guys in the Telegram groups, it's primarily just to like steal mind share from a lot of these other chains, because like there's no reason why, given all these available tools, people will still continue to ignore Bitcoin Cash, right? So even if it's a very, very basic proof of concept, just to showcase that it can be done, people don't have to use it, right? But the fact that people are able to build it should be able to like convince a lot of the other people that's working on other chains, even if it's just for like cross-chain compatibility, right? Like people can still run their things on Ethereum, on Solana, on whatever, but for things like cross-chain swaps or that kind of interoperability, this just provides another tool set for people to work on.
Yeah, I guess, like you say, once you just put it in their mind that it's possible to do, then there's just no more excuses, right? If they're struggling to get the BDC guys to do an upgrade or whatever, their sort of cognitive dissonance or lack of interest maybe around using BCH is going to fall apart eventually if every single time they're having one of those problems, they think, well, I could just copy paste this onto BCH and be moving on to the next thing, You can only bash your head against a wall so many times before you think, you know what, let me just open this door and walk through it.
Yeah. Oh, I mean that's the other thing with the covenants and the OPTN conference is that like literally check sig from stack CSFS. That's that's kind of like a carbon copy of check data sig, which it's like we've already had it for over 6-7 years now. But yeah, there's a lot of parallel, and at the very least, like it does help give insights to some of these other chains on like, because in Bitcoin space, there's always, oh, we don't have enough data, or we don't have enough analysis on like what this could do and stuff like that, blah blah blah. It's like, well, you actually do, but just not on this chain, on these other chains, right? So yeah, there's definitely like a lot of room for cross collaboration. It's definitely not like a zero sum game, but yeah, like for people that want to just have some basic level of like support, compatibility, stuff like that, I do think this is like a great starting point.
Yeah, it's amazing. So I guess the more interest we can attract with these ideas, the better interest in ZK technology. But I feel like the other bucket that is always also brought up is these kind of privacy, confidential transactions, that kind of thing, which we have sort of now kicked the door open on in terms of the Velma upgrade and people being interested in doing sort of the Monero style stuff or the Zcash style stuff. I guess the Z in Zcash stands for zero knowledge proofs, right? That would be my assumption. I know it's also Zuko who's the main guy behind it, but I think it is actually Zcash zero knowledge related things. Do you think we'll see some interest from those communities and coins in terms of getting involved in BCH now that we've made that possible for them?
I think it would be good to explore how to bring some of that confidential transactions to Bitcoin Cash. I don't know if people on those chains in particular would be quite happy with more competition, especially if that's their only kind of like selling point, right? So, it's like Monero. It's like, what's the use case for Monero? Private transactions. Technically speaking, you do have MWeb on Litecoin. I guess just not enough people use it at this point. But yeah, no, like these kinds of like anything that can help with more confidentiality with these kind of transactions would help. Um, Especially, so this is something that I don't necessarily want to make too many changes and proposals on, just because when you're talking about these kind of confidential transactions, you're also somewhat touching into like the actual transaction format. So things like the balance, right? Right now it's just numbers, but if you use something like confidential transactions (CT), that would basically be like a hash. So how exactly would that be compatible? That's if Bitcoin Cash or people in Bitcoin Cash want to explore that, I think like it would definitely be like a couple years down the road. But hopefully, like this provides a good starting point, at least on the scripting layer of the transactions, the unlocking conditions. So you don't necessarily have to like reveal how exactly your transactions are being locked up and unlocked. You could just provide these kinds of like shortened proofs, like bullet proofs or so on and so forth. And yeah, like if like people in the space feels it's a safe enough upgrade to make in the future, then we can definitely look at like changing the transaction formats, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, okay, excellent. I agree with you that the Monero guys and so forth, they're going to be spitting. They've kind of seemed to have backed off a little bit after trying to FUD us most recently. And then it was kind of like, yeah, well, eventually we're going to just build your chain as a cash token or whatever. So good luck
Yeah.
with that. They seem to have gone a bit quiet after after that one. But of course, we do actually have to live up to our end of the bargain and actually build it sooner or later, of course. There's a million problems, and that's only one of them. Do you have any thoughts on, like, if somebody is listening to this and they are quite interested in this, what would you recommend would be their first steps to get involved in it? Obviously, they can read your paper and look at the chips you've done, and maybe reach out to you for collaboration. Where are you hoping to see this kind of energy and momentum go?
Honestly, just do it, right? Not gonna lie, this paper it was largely grok, and spending a good part of a day just going back and forth with it, right? Just where exactly, and the main thing with a lot of these AIs tools and whatnot is, just try to have a more critical eye in terms of the data that's returning back. So, like definitely treat it with a grain of salt, but once like it seems good enough, and quite honestly, this paper also has a lot of issues in the in the nitty gritty details. So but yeah, just go for it, right? Like there's a lot of good tools out there, like good machine learning bots out there, and if people are actually interested, really all that's kind of needed is knowing where the source materials are. So things like where the opcodes in Bitcoin Cash are actually stored, which ones are actually activated, what are the actual limits that are being implemented, stuff like that, right? So once that's there, it's just a matter of rigorously doing iterations back and forth on like just improving it, right? Um, and yeah, it really doesn't take too much. It takes more smarts rather than effort these days, in my opinion.
All right, so we're calling out to any Giga brains out there to get involved with our zero knowledge research. So speaking of Giga brains, we obviously have the other BCH upgrades as well, always being discussed. Velma went live over a month ago now. Wow, time 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 flies. That feels like it's blinked past. But we also have loops, pay to script. Now we have bitwise math and op eval slash functions also being proposed. Do you have any takes on any of them, and how are you feeling about the BCH protocol dev?
Um, Honestly, as long as people are doing the due diligence and making sure that these upgrades are relatively safe and like not too extravagant, like some of these other chains, then yeah, for sure, like looping, that'll be what a narrative change that would be, like for something like Bitcoin to actually have loops, or any form of Bitcoin to have loops. That would be, like quite the paradigm shift for a lot of people. Pay to script, Bitwise. I'll be honest, I haven't really looked into a lot of these kind of things. I just trust Jason, and like I'm sure he's like confident enough to make sure that everything's good there. But just in terms of like for any sort of like app developers, like these things would obviously be beneficial, right? Anyone who's worked with cache scripts, like having these kinds of basic, I wouldn't even say functionalities, like basic familiarity with what they're used to would be really, really good. And yeah, like 1 minute blocks, quite honestly, it's something that, like I think people shouldn't have too much dogma attached to it. Because if we do look at, like how exactly these kinds of limits were originally set, it wasn't really set with a great amount of rigor. But it was kept, just because, politics or whatever, right? Tribalism. So yeah, like as long as the overall disruptions are kept to a minimal, I'm fine with that, right? Um, I think the main thing is if there are any sort of future upgrades where it would take a tremendous amount of effort to get everyone onboarded. So, for example, like the new transaction formats, I think it's TXV5 that Jason was proposing. Um, Even if that were to be, like very, very safe and very, very well tested out, just in terms of like the different wallets out there that's willing to support it and all that kind of stuff, it's like it goes way beyond the technical viability. Then it becomes, like a social viability. Like would people actually want to adopt it, and how much effort would it take for them to actually adopt it? So yeah, like these kinds of changes and these kinds of proposals and upgrades seem, fairly low hanging fruit in terms of, like what could be realistically achieved, and just in terms of the onboarding. So yeah, I do like this. I do like these kind of things quite a lot.
All right, big thumbs up for all of those. Then, okay, moving on. We've got the BTC conference, which was a little while ago now, but we didn't get a chance to cover it on the last episode. So I wanted to bring it up briefly here as well. And you and I were also at Op Next in April. So because we were there and we were able to sort of more in the mix, talking to people face to face and stuff like that, that seems to have had a fairly decent ripple effect kind of in the industry. And it's made me think a lot more about how BCH can help to break through that level of being unknown or maybe not as considered, like you said, with the zero knowledge stuff, or just kind of with anything, which is that when you're face to face with people and you're there for real, suddenly it becomes hard to dismiss, these online people who are just creating hype or whatever. Like once you've done that sort of proof of work to show up in person and be discussing, suddenly you seem a lot more credible. And I really noticed that as a result of our trip to Op Next. I was wondering if you had any commentary on that. And I know you go to a lot of crypto conferences, whether that sort of stood out for you in terms of the impact we made, or what we could do to maybe bring that to more other types of crypto conferences.
Yeah, so for the Op Next conference, it's really eye-opening at the very least for me, to see, like where exactly the people in the Bitcoin space are like headed, and like their kind of directions and stuff like that. But also, like just a little bit, it's kind of like, hey, I just want to troll some of these people. It's like you guys could be doing all this on Bitcoin Cash, right? But no, it's good to have those kinds of like intellectual like collaboration and stuff, just discussing these kinds of ideas, and not just discussing ideas, but having your ideas challenged. And whether, like there is a difference between, just going out to these kinds of conferences and just shilling your products, but not being able to withstand these kinds of criticisms from other people, versus, like, hey, this is what we got, and who would like to, poke holes at it. And when they find out that there aren't many hosts who actually poke, then that kind of like really again just changes a lot of their perspective on things. So yeah, for the OpNext conference, I definitely feel that a lot more people in the Bitcoin core space, at least the ones who are interested in covenants, because there's definitely a group that's not interested in covenants at all. But the covenant people definitely are, like it's fairly nice to actually interact with them on that kind of aspect. I won't comment too much on the Bitcoin 2025 because one, I didn't go, and two, it just seems like a lot of the suit coiners, people who like legacy industries, big institutions and whatnot, they're trying to onboard. And I mean, that's nice, but you could have literally just had any other crypto conference and just had a big focus on Bitcoin, and it would get the same effects, right? So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I also haven't been. I've never been. I'm part of me considering going next year, but year after year after year, we do less and less kind of focus on this because it's less and less sort of relevant to what's going on. But just to put it in the history books, it seems like this year there was, like you said, more and more sort of industry and suit coiners. There was quite a lot of talk about stable coins. It seems like Ross Ulbricht was sort of the headliner, and he gave his talk saying that maximalism kind of isn't the way you want to go. That seems to have been the vibe that he's picked up after having been out of prison, because he gave this elaborate analogy to the wasp nests and how if, a whole hive of wasps or several hives, if they are attacking you by one by one, or if you're dealing with them one by one, it's not a problem, but if they all attack you at once, you'd be in a lot of trouble. And that's kind of how he feels about the BTC community trying to sort of dismiss other blockchains, or other blockchains being separated from BTC too much, is that it's just fragmentation of the industry, which should involve maybe competition or healthy rivalry, but not necessarily kind of trying to denigrate or exclude other people. Michael Saylor has been talking recently a bit how BTC doesn't need to be a medium of exchange at all. So it's now pivoted from, well, it's a store of value and medium of exchange is kind of secondary, to we don't need to be medium of exchange. Don't use BTC for payments. So the frog is being kind of cooked there. But from the outside, it definitely seemed like the 2025 BTC conference was getting more and more people from all kinds of different projects involved. So it's sort of watering down in terms of the maximalism element. What do you think about next year? If we, like we did with OpNext, we had a little contingent with the four of us there sort of representing BCH. It'd be pretty cool if we did that next year at the BTC conference, and we had, I don't know how many people, 4 to 10 or whatever BCHs. Maybe we could even get a booth. I don't know, and have a little Bcash segment inside the conference.
I wouldn't recommend a booth just because they're quite expensive, and just in terms of what I've seen, the return isn't really that great. For the more specialized conferences like OpNext, I think it would be best to just try to get some of the speaker slots or be on some of the panels, because it is a lot more technical focus and it's more narrow in that kind of scope at the very least, right? For these kinds of like Bitcoin 2025 or any other the crypto conferences for the general public, I guess, quote unquote. Like these kinds of side events where like you're just piggybacking off of the actual number of attendees coming out. That would be really good. So one of the strategies that like groups like Solana and the Solana foundations have always pursued is they don't sponsor any of the, or they rarely, very, very rarely sponsor the main conference that they try to piggyback off of, but they only have their own like side events where like it's a full day, they stack up on the talks and so on and so forth. So it depends on like what the actual event is, in my opinion. Again, if it's more so narrow focused on these kinds of specific things, like OpNext with the tech talks and whatnot, then just try to be like present in terms of like some sort of speaker slot. If it's more generic, then yeah, try to have your own side events where you're just pulling the attention and traction away from the main events. And quite honestly, for a lot of these bigger conferences, the real party is actually at the side events. So, right, if you want to have a good time, just have a, let's say, like a Bitcoin Cash focused side event where people are drinking, people are showcasing their works, and yeah, overall just be open with anyone that wants to come in and join and just check out what's going on.
This is actually a fascinating idea because I heard the same thing from Callisti, who was actually there on the ground. He said basically the same thing, which is that now, because there's so many people that are already in that one place, the network effect is quite high, but it doesn't necessarily need to concentrate on the actual sort of venue or event itself. So he went to, there was a little kind of ordinals side event. There was the Litecoin conference, which I think was also just sort of like a one-room little side event, or maybe even the following day or whatever. And perhaps we can also do something like that. I'm trying to think of a catchy name for it now, but the Bcash Bash or something like that at the little side event where we just make it fun and we have some of the cool, BCH people there. I think that would also just cause a bit of a stir. It would kind of, it's like taking it to that next level. It's like if you start showing up at their conferences, it's like, okay, we've got our own act together, and now we're coming to represent and wave our flag in your conference. If it then starts to be coming, okay, now we're running our own sort of small, like, competing or associated conference right next to your one, that's really a declaration of war.
Yeah, and quite honestly, I think like that's where the kind of like the community driven chains versus the foundation driven chains, that kind of like separates, or that there's a distinction between that. Just because like for these kinds of, like, let's say Polkadot, Solana, even Litecoin to a certain extent, they do have a foundation there behind it. It's a lot easier to just approach that one single entity. It's like, hey, there's this big event coming up and we need some funds. And it's like, okay, here's the approval process and stuff like that, right? But I think even like for the guys in Monero, I think there's like a Monero con going on right now in New Hampshire. And I don't know who's organizing it, but I don't think there's going to be a foundation, like a Monero foundation. It's like, hey, yeah, we love this initiative, right? So there's definitely need to be a lot more of a community-wide coordination and letting people be aware of like what exactly the value proposition is to doing these kinds of things in wherever areas.
Yeah, but I like the idea. I think some kind of little BCH side event, I can imagine that getting like a lot of interest, because if we did it, and even if it wasn't necessarily like that big, if we just had a little bit of our own spin on it, a little bit of our own flavor, a little bit of our own different ideas, I think a lot of people would be like, wait, they actually put this together and did it. They would want to come along and find out what it was about, right? It would be so curious, especially if it was the first year that it had ever happened. So maybe that's something. I don't know, Jet, what do you think? Could we run a nice little, Bcash side event? I think it would be interesting, right?
Yeah, I don't see why not. I mean, I'm in support of, like I've mentioned this in another podcast, just DDoSing their conferences with like get all attendees of Bliss to show up there. Like, who cares? Let's see what happens.
Well, but that's the thing. It's that whole thing about where is the best party, right? If we can literally run it right next to theirs, but then ours will be obviously more fun because it won't be full of like hoaxes and suit coiners and shilling by like some politician who's just grifting and is going to be uninvolved the next month. If we, that's where we need to have a BCH hackathon, literally like at the tent or the room outside the BTC conference for the real builders. Maybe we can workshop something like that. I don't know. All right. Well, I think we'll we'll work on that. But I do like the idea of that. I think it would make a huge difference. I think it would be really interesting. Okay, so let's check in on our little BTC friends over there since the last episode of the show, how they've been getting along. BTC Core surprised everyone, I guess, including myself, and they just merged their controversial op return filter PR and said it's going to ship in V30 in October. This included Gloria, who merged the PR, giving a big announcement about it and throwing some shade on the Knots guys as just LLMs or bots, which of course they weren't happy about. Knots has continued to grow up to 13%. So they are still gaining traction, and we'll see how that goes. Of course, they still need to hit that sort of 25%, 20 to 25% level before things really start to kick into gear or higher. But we'll see in as time goes on whether they are or are not as largely sort of or universally represented as they think they are. And at the same time, the CTV brigade have decided that they're sick of kind of being gaslit forever, I suppose, and they released a letter, which I'll just read two little excerpts from here. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it says, quote, June 9th, 2025, to the technical Bitcoin community, we believe that the best next step for Bitcoin would be to activate opcheck template verify CTV BIP 119 and opcheck sig from stack CSFS BIP 348. These opcodes enable functionality for a broad set of uses that will allow Bitcoin to preserve and expand its role as a scarce, censorship-resistant store of value, blah, blah, blah. We respectfully ask Bitcoin Core contributors to prioritize the review and integration of CTV PR 31989 or similar and CSFS PR 32247 or similar within the next 6 months. We believe this timeline allows for rigorous final review and activation planning. This request isn't meant to suggest that these contributors dictate the consensus process, but rather it is an acknowledgement that before these opcodes can be activated, they must be implemented in the most widely used Bitcoin client. As application and protocol developers, we're convinced of the significant benefits that these changes would bring to end users of Bitcoin, even if only considering their use for layer 1 security and layer 2 scaling solutions. We are optimistic that given the limited size and scope of these changes in both concept and implementation, they represent a realistic next step in the continuing and important work of preserving Bitcoin's unique promise, end quote. So that's kind of a very mildly worded, please do this in the next 6 months, but they didn't actually give any kind of, like, they didn't give a date or a deadline in terms of by this specific, I guess 6 months from June 9th would be December 9th, but it doesn't say specifically. And then they don't really say, like, if you don't do that, what are we going to do about it? But it nevertheless got some criticism for being a threat or ultimatum type of vibe. This is, of course, all very reminiscent of the New York Agreement, which was infamously signed by a lot of the community that wanted to move kind of a block size increase through in the block size war, which also got accused of being some kind of corporate takeover. What do you make of all this, Jerry? What's going on here? Like Bitcoin Core just slamming through the changes and CTV hoping that they're going to be the next ones to be blessed? What's going on?
So just a bit of context in terms for like background info, I guess. So in April, almost all the discussions on the Twitter Spaces and whatnot for Bitcoin was focused on like these kinds of covenants and so on and so forth. And then right after OpNext conference, I guess someone in Blockstream decided it was a good idea to unilaterally push through the op return changes with no discussions, with no proposals, with nothing like this. And they're just like, let's just go through all the contentions line by line to see, what actual objections people have, right? So it's like, what I do feel like the Covenant folks in Bitcoin Core needs to, grow a pair. Just like push out your own client, right? Like you can just fork the code, you just clone it, just push it out there. But this kind of begging for Core to like review and do the integration is kind of like why, right? They didn't do that. They didn't bother with any of that stuff with the op returns. So like, why are you guys doing this? Like at least with knots, like they have the balls to just create their own client, and I mean it's still compatible, so it's not like they're trying to fork anything. But yeah, it's it's kind of weird how these guys are going about it. And obviously, as you said, like the letter is definitely got positive feedbacks, but it's definitely got a lot of negative feedback as well. So yeah, I'm not very optimistic in the covenants activating anytime soon. Maybe 2028. But
Even just saying that, of course I'm gonna like that makes me laugh out loud. If they're gonna wait till 2028, that is the next 3 years that we just talked about at the start of the show.
Yeah.
But by then, the fucking flippening will be on. BCH will be mooning to 20 grand after we have another 3 years of upgrades, and BCH Bash is already the best part of BTC conference. Like they don't have that kind of time, right?
Yeah, I mean the other thing too is that like there's really nothing to hold them back from actually just releasing their own client implementation,
No, then they
and
can they
just
can
like
get fudded. That's why if they release a client, then the FUD starts. You guys are an attack on
they're all being
Bitcoin.
flooded at this point. Like Core is being flooded for being taken over. Knots is being flooded by like whatever like the bots and like small blocks, and like it's all just a big flood party at this point.
I can see CTV activating as like a desperate attempt. Like they see BCH starting to skyrocket and they're like, holy shit, this is where we
We gotta
lost these
catch these
people. We need
guys.
to put this in. We need to invite them back. Come on, guys. We've got CTV now. Come check.
Yeah. I
It's
mean,
too
the thing
late.
is that like all these changes help what's going on in the Bitcoin Core side of things. Like the Lightning channels. It's these kind of covenants can help secure those channel endpoints a lot better, and so on and
But
so
even
forth.
some of the
Right. So
lightning shills hate this stuff. That's the funniest thing about it. Is it's like they like what's his name? Mechanic. He was kind of like, look, everybody says that I'm this laser eye ossifier type, but no. I'm on board with CTV. I think that's pretty good. I think we can upgrade the Lightning network with it. Then you had all this drama go down, and now he's like, BTC Core are captured, and we're getting wrecked by these spammers. So CTV, get that out of here. I'm not interested in it. The division is always increasing because they're not all on the same page, right?
yeah, and that's where the funniest part with the like how the Bitcoin Core people were going about the op return is that, again, they're just unilaterally pushing it down to everyone, right? Then it's like, who actually has contention? Let's go through them line by line by line just to, like address them all, right? And I feel like that's a great way of going about it, especially if you're going to have contentious, consensus like this. It's like, well, what are the actual arguments people have against it? Right. The things I keep hearing is that like, oh, potentially in the future there might be some attack vectors that we haven't foreseen and stuff like that. It's like, well, who's making those statements? Most of the time, there's non-technical people who are just scared shitless. Yeah, like, oh, their chain's going to be spammed and it's going to be unusable. Well, it's going to be unusable one way or another, but like your JPEGs and stuff like that.
Well, but
So
they're making those statements for a reason, which is that the last two times, the high priest core devs told them, technically speaking, SegWit was a miracle. We had that quote from Mechanic on that episode where he was talking about SegWit is great, Taproot is great, and then now they're in JPEG scammery hell because they thought that the devs were competent when actually they were not only incompetent, they were actually sabotaging the chain. So now the naive good actors are like, well, if you just put in some other thing, how do we know that's also not going to blow up and make the thing even worse? Like there's no level of trust in their ecosystem. There's no communication between the technical and the non-technical communication because the technical people are divided between actively sabotaging the project and actively trying to move it forward, and everybody else is trying to figure out who to listen to and what actually makes sense. And in that kind of environment, it's very easy to default to, well, let's just not change anything, and then you just end up ossified by default, right?
yeah, it's a very toxic social landscape. Let's just say that. And yeah, a lot of the productive stuff that could be done is just unfortunately just drawn down by a lot of these like back and forths, and Yeah, and it's unfortunate, quite honestly, because like if you just look at things objectively, there's even if there are potential attack vectors and so on and so forth, that's great, but like you should focus your time on solving those attack vectors, not
That's
doing
it.
this like online back and forth.
That's right. That's why it's so messed up, because BCH doesn't need to freak out about, okay, firstly, we test everything, we do everything, etc., to get it right, the first time. But people are also not freaking out about doing a change, because if there was a problem, if there was a bug, there was an obvious bug that everybody basically agreed on, we would just fix it. And like they are in this situation where they already had that happen with inscriptions and they haven't been able to fix it. So they're kind of like, if we introduce anything more into the mix, not only will that be making it worse, but also there's no guarantee. In fact, there's a strong likelihood we won't be able to do anything about it. It will just compound and get worse forever.
Yeah, and quite honestly, like the worst case scenario for these kind of contentious stuff is just a fork, which I guess in Bitcoin Cash we're already used to it. Bitcoin Code is still kind of treating it as taboo and like unforgettable sin and so on and so forth like that.
Okay, so Jerry, while we've got you on the show, then give me a prediction. Okay, in 6 months' time, when the clock runs out on this proposal, note that you had also, I don't have the link here, but Udi was also saying this week, OPCAT is going to activate this year. I hope that it's with CTV or something, or whatever he said, but he was basically like, we're going to ship this year. Anyway, in 6 months' time, the clock runs out. It's December. The 6 months is over. CTV is probably nowhere. What happens? Are the CTV guys? Well, firstly, do you think that Bitcoin Core will agree with them and add it in the next 6 months? And if they don't, what are they going to do once the 6 month clock runs out?
Yeah, I'm actually of the opinion that Ops CTV and Ops CSFS is a lot safer than the OpCat being included in. But hey, if they rather push OpCat but not this stuff, like good luck to them, right? At the end of the day, I just don't think that Core would tolerate these kinds of things happening, especially if it's not coming from Blockstream or any of those kind of companies. But yeah, I wouldn't hold my breath. Hopefully, like maybe if OpCat can come in, then some more interesting things get done. But you're still gonna leave a lot of people disappointed, one way or another.
So make a prediction. In 6 months' time, CTV will be merged by Bitcoin Core, yes or no?
No, no.
And after it's not merged, and we're in December, and all the people that signed on to this letter and thought it was their great hope, what do they do next? Do they start a minority chain split? Do they launch a client and say we're going to force it in that way? Do they defect to BCH? Do they rage quit? What happens to them?
Yeah, I think they're gonna. I think they should at least try to release their own clients that supports it, and just let the market decide, right? Like if like those kind of soft fork implementations, if enough nodes start running in the software, then it just takes over or something like that. But yeah, like I don't think they would just give up immediately afterwards. I think there would be like at least one or two more serious attempts on getting these kinds of upgrades through. And once that is exhausted, then yeah, maybe they'll look into like Bitcoin Cash or some other chains, or maybe like a layer two, wherever their expertise are better valued. Right?
Yeah, Jet, what do you think? We've already done the predictions about Mechanic. Now we have CTV in the ring as well. 6 months' time, what are we going to see?
Nothing.
Nothing.
No change.
It's not going to get merged, but then what?
Then people are gonna throw their fists in the air and stomp around a bit, and then there will be no change.
They'll do nothing.
Yeah.
They won't switch to BCH. They won't launch a client. They won't do anything.
I think
They'll just capitulate.
I think it'll take like at least 6 to 12 months for the average Bitcoiner to
Even hear about it.
Yeah. I don't know. I think if they are open to BCH, it's going to take a while. It's going to take them sitting in our Telegram groups for a while, and maybe in 6 months after that, we see like maybe they'll join in on a meme here or there, and then 6 months after that, they're like, you know what, guys, I did pick up my first coin.
Yeah, well, that's right. I mean, I just think it's so painful for these guys to watch Velma ship, I think, because Jessica, they weren't really paying attention. Velma a little bit, and just it shipped. That's it. It was a month ago. It's fine. That's it. Now we're discussing the next round of upgrades. November it locks in. Next year it goes live. After that's even another 6 months in the future, right? So if whatever useless protesting there is in December or January is going to be facing down, oh, it's May again, and the Bcashers are celebrating another successful upgrade once again, showing that they are the more competent Bitcoiners. Like, what do we do?
Hopefully we'll make Bitcoin turn complete, quote unquote, by that time.
Well, exactly. How far ahead of the road can we get? I've got a little meme here. These nuts guys have started branding the Bitcoin core client the Chaincode core client, which is just absolutely incredible that they're like, oh, look, there's vested financial interest in this company called Chaincode who have paid off a bunch of the devs and seem to be coordinatedly blocking off our ability to ship an upgrade or change things in the way that we want to. It literally is exactly the same as Blockstream. In fact, it's even mostly the same guys, but they are just completely unaware of that history, or they're just unable to understand the parallel that just this time they are on the wrong side of the hijacking, basically. Oh, man. I don't know if this kind of memes amuse you as much as me, but it does a lot. Oh, man. Okay. All right. Community comment of the week. This one comes from David Shattuck. I don't think we had time for it last week, where he said in July of 2022, we didn't have this last week, right, Jet? July 22, David Shattuck says, want to know how I know most people in crypto have no idea what's going on? Monero, XMR, Bitcoin Cash, BCH. And he has a chart of the Monero and BCH market cap, which is less than SHIB, who does actually nothing, versus BCH, which had all the merchant adoption, and Monero, which was usable, for privacy, right? And then he's done an update now, roughly 3 years later, saying markets cannot stay irrational forever because BCH is now flipped SHIB, so it's bigger than SHIB on its own, and then Monero obviously adds on top of that, right? So I thought that was just a really good example of how we're constantly receiving this FUD about, oh, the market has spoken and etc. But it's like in the short run, the market's a voting machine, but in the long run, it's a weighing machine, right? Like the project with utility and the truth does rise over time, and the meme coins and crap kind of eventually drains away, right?
Hold on. So is this saying that? Okay, yeah. So despite the fact that it does nothing in the same amount of time, they've gained $2 billion in their market cap. Yeah,
that's right. SHIB was like nearly 40% bigger than BCH and XMR combined by market cap. You think about it, when Monero was like, I don't know, number 35 and BCH was number 25 and SHIB was like number 8 or something. And now it's flipped around where BCH has pumped. BCH is looking, graph was even before the recent pump. BCH would be looking even better after this.
I think it'd be really interesting to see what this would look like year over year.
Yeah, well, that's right. Well, maybe David, if you're out there listening, I'm sure you are, do up a series of charts, and then you could do it as a video, where it transitions or it shows like a year-on-year change. That would actually be pretty interesting. The data's all there. Sometimes the visuals just make a bigger point of it. What do you think, Jared? I mean, you were saying before about meme coins on Solana, and that kind of hype is all past, right? That's all kind of died and like over.
It depends on how much VC money they have left, really. Where else are they getting the money, right? It's low market caps, it's easy to pump the prices, and it's how sustainable could that really be? But yeah, no, like a lot of these chains, like they're heavy into like the VC side of things. Like Chainlink, I think Sui as well, but yeah, the investors need their money back. So it's not like, an actual commodity coin where you're basically just looking at the utility of it. For a lot of these, investors, they're not always the nicest groups of people. Sometimes they're very, very predatory. So you have to balance that as well. And hopefully, like chains like Solana don't blow up immediately like that. I do know they also do have investors backing it up, but hopefully it could be like a slower burn rather than a complete crash out.
Yeah, like you're saying, that's actually an excellent point, really, is that somebody was talking this week about BCH flipped SWE, and someone was talking about the SWE has some big unlocks in July or something. So there's going to be loads of people that are just instantly trying to cash out their
They're
money up.
basically just turning the chain on and off, kind of like Solana a little bit. It's like just freezing your accounts. All the users are the same, but some users are just super users, right?
But like when these coins unlock, it's just that's it. It's literally investors. It's like unlocks in a corporate structure, right? And those people just want to get their money out as fast as possible because the crypto is volatile, and they bought in on the token sale like 3 years ago or whatever, and they're already up 300%. So they want to just get out as fast as possible, which then crashes the price for everyone else, and then boom, that coin's gone. Nobody's hyping it anymore, right? So I just thought it was bizarre. I was like, that's a weird thing to hear from a BCH perspective, having token unlocks. Can you imagine if we were sitting here thinking like, oh shit, guys, like next month there's going to be some big unlocks? No. We only had one unlock, which was the split from BTC, and now that's out of the way. So it's all good. It's all good.
Well,
Okay.
yeah, potentially if things like the Moria USD gets more popular, right? Like more people will be just locking their funds on those kinds of things, and yeah, there might be a big unlock to correspond with whatever central bank policies that there are.
But I mean, that's kind of a different case. People locking money into Moria is bringing value to the ecosystem, whereas unlocks from pre-mined investors is like destroying the value or sucking it away, rather. So
Right.
it's kind of a different case. But it comes to this point. We've got here meme of the week is our good friend Charles Hoskinson from the ADA founder / whatever, who has pre-mined, as this tweet says, how to make money and scam everyone by looking smart. He's pre-mined ETH, told everyone ETH solves real world problems, and then sold his ETH to buy BTC. Then he pre-mined Cardano, and now this is step 5 that we're at now. He's telling everyone Cardano solves real world problems. Step 6, which we're seeing now, is that he's selling his Cardano to buy BTC. So we have a little clip of him here from this week, Jet.
I do believe that it will not materially impact Cardano by doing a conversion of 5 to 10% of the treasury into stable assets and assets like Bitcoin. And in doing this, we can create a yield, and that yield on an annual basis can be used to purchase ADA and over time replenish the treasury. And if this program is successful, then we can actually continue that strategy on an annualized basis, and over a period of 5 to 10 years, potentially grow to $1 billion plus stablecoin treasury and Bitcoin treasury to augment and enhance the ADA value in the treasury that we have. This sets us up for great returns and for a pretty stable floor for the ecosystem as a whole, like you would want in any good sovereign wealth fund. I do believe.
What an absolute scam this is. Seriously, he's trying to wrap it up in all this fancy language, but what he's saying is we had our ADA that we pre-mined. We're going to dump some of that and buy BTC with at least some of it. And the quote-unquote yield that he's talking about is that the ADA price is going to keep cratering against BTC. So then his BTC will be worth more ADA, and then he can rebuy his own ADA that he initially dumped to buy the BTC. Like it's just a total scam. And he knows it, but he's dressing it up in all this nonsense. Of course, he's been roundly called out for this, but when we were talking at the top of the show, ADA rank 10, right? And BCH is starting to close in on it. Well, Charles Hoskinson is busy dumping his bags to kill the ADA price himself. That will be all to our benefit. He should actually just buy some BCH though, but I don't think he's on that level of of getting it. Fanta in the chat says 37D chess, bruh. Exactly. This is some 37D Charles Hoskinson chess. Get your BTC so that you can quote unquote replenish your treasury. That's just dumping your bags. That's what's happening. What do you think, Jerry? Is this just outright grifting, basically?
I just want to emphasize again that I did fail first year math, so a lot of this and how this exactly works, just goes over my head. But yeah, it makes very, very little sense to me. It does seem like, hey, look, if these guys want to do this kind of like swing trading and stuff like that, like go for it, right? Just be transparent on what that is. Like don't dress it up with fancy math and these kind of technical jargons. Like bamboozle people, because like it's that kind of deception that I really think like ticks people off a lot more. Look, if you just come out and blatantly say we're gonna tank the price of whatever to hopefully buy it back later, and this is how we're gonna benefit the community, great. Like at least there's a good amount of transparency in like what you guys are going to do. But when you're dressing it up as like yields and returns, and it's like I have no clue what you're talking about at that point.
Oh man. Anyway, this is Charles Hoskinson, who of course a couple of years ago was busy saying that BTC is useless, it's dying, it's going to be out of the industry, it can't survive in the long term, etc. And now look how the mighty have fallen. That's why I am, of course, agreeing with him in the sense that I think that BTC is not going to be the future, and it will eventually go to zero in a BCH flippening. But I don't believe I've ever said on this show like that's imminent, it's happening right now, it's all going to go. No, of course, the dog and pony show is going to go on for quite a lot longer, and the network effect is massive, and all the money draining out of it's going to take a very long time, and people will keep having misguided efforts into BTC for quite a long time to come. So it's just not really that imminent, I don't think. And I think it would be ridiculous if I spent all this time even saying that and then was like, no, we're going to start the BCH podcast, announces we're building a strategic BTC reserve. We're going to sell our BCH.
I don't think the Bitcoin Cash is like, yeah.
Exactly.
See, Jeremy, he's actually a genius. This is how we get away from the flip starters. We do one more flip start. Sell it immediately for BTC.
Exactly. Well, because there's just crypto is filled with this kind of stuff. Like the same as the Bitcoin Unlimited guys, right? They got a huge donations from the community to start sort of be involved in starting Big Block Bitcoin. They did. There was loads of controversy about, okay, now that the split is done, you should dump your BTC and buy BCH so that make sure you're incentive aligned with the mission, which they didn't do, which then was a good thing in the sense that the BTC price skyrocketed, so they had extra resources. But it was a bad thing because the prediction that they wouldn't be aligned came true, because they were then like, let's use this money and start Nexa instead of just helping BCH. But now they've got Nexa, and then that doesn't even make sense, because I don't know if they've dumped their BTC for Nexa or not. But either way is an L, basically, because if they did dump their BTC to pump the price of Nexa, well, then their Nexa is going to keep probably going into irrelevance. So they've shot themselves in the foot there. And if they did keep the BTC, it shows that they're not really that serious about Nexa, and they're just kind of hedging their bets and half hoping like that BTC is going to work out somehow. So it's just really as simple as like, there's nothing like practice what you preach, put your money where your mouth is a saying for a reason. And that's why I think everybody basically should be like, crypto is designed with that. The whole point is you have a limited amount of the limited amount coin, and therefore you're very motivated to improve that coin, right? Like it would just be nonsense if the BCH as we're out there busy talking about stacking BTC sats and having strategic reserves. No, it's like everybody just has their money in BCH. So when the price goes up, everyone's euphoric, and when it goes down, everyone's like, "Shit, we got to fix this." It's pretty simple, isn't it? Oh man. Anyway, there you go, Charles Hoskinson. I can't wait until when BCH flips Cardano, maybe I can do a tweet, which is like, because he made that tweet about BCH needs to merge with Cardano or something like that, kind of like condescendingly, we're going to bail you. That was the weirdest tweet. It never really made any sense at the time, but it would be a pretty good before and after with BCH flipping Cardano, that's for sure. So I'm in favor of him dumping his ADA and buying BTC, but Charles, if you're listening, you should actually be buying BCH. That would be much better for your strategic reserves. Okay, we have a message to the community. Jerry, your chance to tell the Bitcoin Cash community whatever you think that they need to hear.
I think my only message is, I think we're at a point in Bitcoin Cash where it's a lot easier to showcase and share what Bitcoin Cash has been working on and doing to people in the other chains, right? So it's no longer just a fork of Bitcoin with lower fees and so on and so forth. There's so much more that can be done. And whether it's like people in Polkadot space or like Solana or even Cardano, right? Like just being able to hey, whatever you guys are doing, it's also compatible here, right? Because the general adoption to like no coiners or like people basically have not adopted it, like they're a lot more malleable in terms of which direction they go to, right? They could go to Bitcoin Core, they can go to Bitcoin Cash, Litecoin, Monero, it doesn't matter to them, right? Because to them, it's just basically that payment rail. But I guess like for some of these more, quote unquote maxi or diehard people on some of these chains, a lot of times it really is just, like a lack of awareness in terms of like what's actually possible. Even for like like the Starknet connection that I have, like he just straight up did not know that there was so many things that's happening on the Bitcoin Cash, and even though like they're not likely to start using Bitcoin Cash anytime soon, the fact that like they even know that it's a possibility is like a good step in the right direction, right? So yeah, I definitely would encourage people to try to reach out to some of these other communities, not necessarily try to take them over, but see where exactly the collaborations can be had with them.
Yeah, great point. Great point. Definitely. And the more we can do that in person as well as online too, I think also making a huge difference, because people are receiving comments all day online about this or that, and they're just whatever. But if you're a real person standing in front of them, they sort of think, wow, this is pretty, this is pretty serious. They were, sorted enough to show up here at least too. Okay, our Fund Me contributors: Majumali Marcello, Funding Father, Molecular, the show we love, Cash Stamps, at Cash Dance, BCH for the win, Cash Dragon, RealBitcoin.cash, Murray Store, great work, Burning a Cattle, Bitcoin is cash, Milton Freeman, Emergent Reasons, Stay Grounded, Go Big, Canach, BCH is the Michael Jordan of crypto, yeah, beer, keep building while BTC fights and stagnates, the stage is set for MOE plus SOV, must obsolete ETH first, purely peer.cash, discover the thrill of quest hunting, find hidden cash drops, and collect BCH, and Dora must keep biddling, you have full support from many. Shout out to our donators and our patrons. We have a new one, Ricky, HP, and Kyle. Big shout out to Kyle and our sponsors, General Protocols. Check out bchbull.com. The start guide, FAQ, and links are at bitcoincashpodcast.com. If you're new, listen to episode 85 and try Selene Wallet at selene.cash. Okay, final shout outs for the show, and where can people find more of you, Jerry?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter or X, I guess, at Lightswarm. And funny thing, so Lightswarm is actually the ID I had been using for StarCraft Brood War since 2007. So coming up in August, there's going to be a StarCraft Brood War LAN happening in Chicago, and A Fifth of Gaming has led the efforts in that crowdfunding campaign, that Fund Me campaign. Get some, Bitcoin Cash prize money for 5th to 8th place. We're going to get the payments paid out this time. Last time it was just good advertising, but none of the players actually got paid the 25 Bitcoins. So we're going to make sure these guys get paid this time around. So yeah, it'll be fun. And the guys there are really, really good. And we're all just going to be referring to each other by our in-screen, in-game names and whatnot.
Amazing. Jet, any shout-outs?
Just to my brother, who I suspect is not listening to this, but if you are, happy birthday.
An asshole.
Yeah.
And my shout out, I want to piggyback on that, Jerry. I think you're onto something. A Fifth of Gaming, David Shattuck, always amazing, and they have a Magic tournament going on in 7 days and 4 hours, which I signed up to this afternoon. So it's 1 week from now. It'll be Saturday night. Next week there is over $900 worth of prizes. First place $339, second place $210, third place $129.35, and so forth. There's still more prizes after that. Needs 14 people to fire, so please. Oh, look, we're live on there right now while we're streaming the BCH podcast. Not even if we're streaming the actual matches. That's pretty cool. So yeah, everybody who's interested in Magic or just interested in supporting Bitcoin Cash, trying out a Fifth of Gaming, come get involved in that. You might win some money or you might not, but either way, you'll have a great time, and it's a really cool platform, and the traction on it is slowly growing, and it would be really great to carry that momentum forward. And then, yeah, likewise, obviously in August. So it's really cool to see those initiatives coming to fruition in the community. All right, that'll do it, I think, for today. Thank you all for listening. Till next time.
Release Roger from prison. Hurry up, bro, soon to be all season. Peer cash, that was the vision, but they locked them up cause they fear his mission. Dog Bitcoin Jesus, straight from the start. 2011, spreading the spark. Told him the bank's gon' keep y'all in chains. Now he's in a cell where McAfee's name remains. Regulators hate when the people got power, so they set traps, watch them all turn sour. Spain got them locked, extradition in sight. For what, selling freedom? Nah, that ain't right. That they hate BCH cause it moves too fast. Still middleman fees the Wall Street tax. Now they got them shackled, trying to shut them down, but the blockchain's still running underground. To Donald, release Roger from prison. Hurry up, bro, soon to be all season. Peer cash, that was the vision, but they locked them up cause they fear his mission. The boss can't hold a decentralized mind. The state wanna break them, but they way behind. 2024, it's a brand new race. Fiat's burning, they trying to save face. Inflation robbing every man and his soul. Meanwhile, BCH still playing his role. They print trillions, stealing your wealth, while Roger sitting in a cell by himself. The elites want control, they don't want you free. That's why they took them same thing they did to McAfee. They silenced the ones who exposed the game, but Bitcoin Cash still carry his name. Authorities in Spain have detained Roger for U.S. officials seeking extradition for alleged tax crimes. The same facility where John McAfee was found dead in 2021. Some say this is politically motivated, but boom, beat drops again. To Donald, release Roger from prison. Hurry up, bro, soon to be all season. Peer cash, that was the vision, but they locked them up cause they fear his mission. They scared of the truth, they scared of the chain, but BCH gon' break through the pain. Freedom ain't free, the war ain't done. They took Roger down, but the people ain't won. Roger, free Roger, free Roger, free Roger. Coin, cash is freedom. Roger, free Roger, free Roger, free Roger. Coin, cash is freedom. And the tyranny. Big Don already.